Hello indie game fans! The 2010s sure were a wild decade for indie games following the boom of 2008 and the rise of Xbox Live Arcade. In that time, genres have come and gone, been iterated upon and been refined to the excellent quality that they are today, so here are the top 25 best indie games of the decade. Bear in mind that this is my personal list with some bias towards newer games, so if your favourite is not listed, do pop it in the comments below. And one game that we sadly have to say goodbye to is Rogue Legacy, the game that got me into indie gaming in the first place, since we start the list with Dead Cells, the roguelite action platformer that arguably refined that roguelite gameplay loop to the highest extent. This is one for the Discord fam, but playing as an amorphous blob possessing a suit of armor, the self-titled Roguemania explores the possibility of having Metroidvania elements in the genre with multiple paths, but it just feels so good to play, from rolling and smashing through doors to butt stomping on enemies. The upgrade system is very compelling, but can feel like a little bit of a grind, but it has certainly popularized an art style which we will be seeing more of in the years ahead. I'll be honest, I have yet to play Minecraft myself for whatever reason, but my crafting survival game of choice has to be Terraria. I really enjoy the gameplay loop in this, but in addition to the sandbox aspect, there are boss fights in this as well. If you are familiar with crafting games, you are dropped into a procedurally generated world and have to go about mining and gathering resources to build tools and weapons to explore even further. In the many years since launch, this has continued to be patched with even more content with that timeless pixel art look, and as a result, is one of the most feature-dense packages out there. While I'm not up to date with the game, the sheer amount of new stuff and the insanity that I see in the trailer makes me want to go back, so perhaps it is time for a little visit. I honestly believe that most modern action games like Katana Zero, Ruiner, and even Ape Out can be traced back to one very important game, and that is 2012's Hotline Miami, which in 2020 I believe is still worth checking out. This is an action title where you play as perhaps a mentally disturbed serial killer being egged on by a voice on the telephone to kill a ton of Russian mafia members, where different masks gives you different abilities, but the core action, raw brutality and instant reset loop kept me playing. So many titles have that indescribable Hotline Miami feel, so the OG certainly is one of the significant titles of the decade. When we talk about art in games, Cuphead would certainly come in front and center, since this is an action platformer that is primarily a boss rush title with some linear run and gun levels. Ever since it popped up in a sizzle reel during one of the E3s, the look resembling 1930s cartoons immediately captured the hearts of many since it just looks awesome. Cuphead and Mugman got into trouble with the devil gambling at his casino and must help the devil recover the souls of all those in debt or risk losing their own. This is one of the more challenging titles since the bosses have different stages with different attack patterns and the sheer amount of stuff on screen in the later levels can be quite distracting. However, it is so satisfying when you do finally beat a boss, and even better if done flawlessly, But coming back to the art, a real top-notch title. At the time, my 2017 Game of the Year was Slime Rancher, an adorable farming sim that has you wrangling slimes on the far, far range. I love building pens, capturing slimes, feeding them, selling their poop for money, and building up and upgrading both the ranch and your equipment. I often talk about exploration in games, and Slime Rancher does this very nicely with a large variety of environments ranging from caves, jungles, deserts, and more. But there isn't really a strong narrative hook. Despite this, the little bits of lore and story revealed is compelling, and in the years since then, free content patches have been applied, adding even more systems, mechanics, and slimes, like automation using drones, a digital world, and more. The 2016's The Witness is a puzzle game that takes the concept of line mazes and makes it so much more. Explore this beautiful, lush island, solving puzzles, unlocking doors, and activating towers in order to get to the heart of the island and to solve its mystery. If you thought line mazes were simple, be prepared for a rude awakening, since things quickly escalate, with puzzles in each area having their own rules and logic to them. What is most interesting is that there are puzzles that are not explicitly framed as such, having you to identify shapes and formations along the coastline, for example, and it was moments like these that were pure genius. Again, no shooty bang bang fun in this, but for a more cerebral experience that might make you look like a crazy person when you start keeping a journal on this game, this is certainly an experience. While games like Celeste and the OG Super Meat Boy are touted as the platformers of choice, one excellently made title that I really like is Slime Sun SUPERSLIME Edition. Play as a slime, consumed by a giant worm, only for him to realize that there is an entire city within the stomach of this worm. Jump, slide, and slime your way through the worm and out of its mouth. The Super Slime Edition adds 2 additional campaigns in Blackbird's Kraken and Sheeple's sequel, as well as the level editor, which were released in a Shovel Knight-like fashion, but the platforming feels good, the time trial and optional collectibles fun and challenging to obtain, and the secrets and characters in the city are awesome as well. Criminally underrated and well worth a play. The 2019's Disco Elysium won a bunch of awards for good reason, since this is a narrative CRPG that really focuses on the role-playing aspect of such games, akin to the tabletop campaigns that many people run. Rather than a cyberpunk, fantasy, or sci-fi setting, this instead seems fairly mundane, where you play as a detective sent to investigate a murder. The thought cabinet system and quality of the writing are excellent, so for one of the best written games of the decade, this gets a spot.
Welcome, welcome, my new toys. Now dance. Dance for me!
It is no secret that I love Crypt of the Necrodancer, a roguelike dungeon crawler where you have to move on the beat.
You think you can defeat me?
I do. I will.
The music is epic and really is what ties the game together, since all enemies move and attack on the beat. You have a variety of weapons, armors and characters at your disposal, with suitably musically themed bosses as well. But do bear in mind that this is one of the more challenging titles in the genre.
You will never escape. You will never reach the end of the crypt of the Necrodancer.
When we talk about the enduring legacy of Dark Souls, it certainly has spawned a whole bunch of Souls-like games, whether in terms of mechanics, from stamina and bonfires, to the setting and the grim dark atmosphere, and arguably, Salt and Sanctuary did it the best in 2D. On a mission to escort a princess to seal a diplomatic deal, your ship is attacked by an eldritch monstrosity and you wake up shipwrecked on an island. While the character models do look quite ugly in my opinion, the sheer variety of the classes, gods that you can pledge yourself to, the massive Path of Exile style skill tree, the world building and backtracking, as well as the iconic boss fights certainly have their appeal. Very replayable, with challenging stamina-based combat, and is still a standout title in the space. Alright, so we finally get a Metroidvania on this list with SteamWorld Dig 2, where you play as Dorothy, having to search for Rusty, the missing protagonist from the first game. This is a classic example of sequels done right, where it gets a visual upgrade, adds new mechanics and gadgets, but still preserves its core gameplay loop of exploring and mining for resources, returning to the surface to sell them, and using this to get upgrades that enable you to mine more efficiently and to hold a larger amount. I love developer Image and Form due to this series, so fingers crossed for a third entry soon. Baba Is You ranked high on my list of indie games in 2019 since it is a block-pushing puzzle game that allows you to change the rules on the fly. The sheer ingenuity in the design of these levels and puzzles is so impressive, since constraints from the level forces you to think in different ways, and while it can be frustrating to make zero progress in a play session, it really does make you think, and is what I love the most about puzzle games. So an absolute masterpiece in this case. When we talk about games that have a significant impact on the genre, Hyper Light Drifter is one such title. A beautiful pixel art action-adventure game in the vein of Zelda, you explore a mysterious, ruined world with seemingly the objective of activating beacons, which are, of course, guarded by enemy bosses. There isn't an explicit narrative story per se, since this has no text or voiceover, and instead is told through the environments, locations, and creatures that you encounter. A little vague and weak narratively in one sense, the action does feel good with dodging and attacking, but a title for people who love to explore and get lost in the world. There are a number of upcoming indie games that very much look inspired by this, especially in terms of the art style, which I expect you to come across on the channel very soon. One of the more massive indie games of the decade is Undertale, and for good reason, since this subverts many genre norms, with a bullet hell avoider mark forming the main part of the combat. The characters are fun and quirky, but as with many massively popular games, the fandom can be a little off-putting, but don't let that get in the way. One of wrestler Kenny Omega's favourite games, my actual favourite part of this game is the music, which is just excellent. As with many genre-defining titles, Slay the Spire has perhaps come out way ahead of the pack of roguelite deck builders, with a system that seems so obvious in hindsight for turn-based games in telling you exactly what enemies are going to do in the next turn. As such, you can plan accordingly, blocking or attacking at the right time. This has a randomized dungeon map as in FTL, filled with enemies, mini-bosses, shops and random events, where again, the outcome of your random event choices are clearly spelled out. As such, the game feels very fair to play and any mistake made is on you. However, the sheer variety of cards, characters and Binding of Isaac style relics gives me that one more run feel. Just a quick note, if you are new here and enjoyed the video so far, be sure to subscribe and check out the Discord channel while you are at it. Here's to more indie gaming coverage, so back to the video.
From the creators of Bastion and Transistor.
We move into the top 10 with PYRE, officially the third title from Supergiant Games, which unfortunately seems to be their least popular based on the number of reviews.
Join their quest for freedom.
However, this odd combination of mystic basketball and visual novel with adaptive storytelling is one of my favourite experiences of the decade due to the sheer beauty of the world, fantastic characters and compelling gameplay. Play as an exile banished to the wasteland and lead your band of adventurers in a series of raids to win back their freedom and perhaps spark a revolution as well. Each character feels unique, with their own style of movement, attacks and upgrades, and very interestingly, win or lose, the story advances regardless and adapts based on your choices.
Who remains? You decide.
Fantastic soundtrack as well, which I listen to outside of the game, but you can't really go wrong with Supergiant Games. Survival games have become a genre of its own, but the number of multiplayer-focused ones like Rust and Ark Survival Evolved are not really my jam, so my pick has to be Subnautica, where you crash land in the middle of an ocean on an alien planet and must find ways to survive.
Scans indicate this location supports a diverse and healthy ecosystem.
Thalassophobia might put some people off this game, but the exploration of one of the world's greatest mystery in the ocean, but in an alien context, is very interesting to me.
Study, catalogue new species, secure food and energy, and gather data on unusual phenomena.
The loop of gathering resources, hunting, fishing, crafting, expanding your underwater base, and exploring wreckages and alien structures kept me hooked. The gigantic alien monsters in the sea are absolutely terrifying as well, giving that very tense kind of survival experience, so this is very unique since other survival games are mostly confined to land, but excellent title overall. Turn-based strategy games will never be the same again with the release of Into the Breach. Much like other genre-defining titles on this list, Into the Breach changes the game by, again, perfect information. Playing as time and dimension warping mech pilots sent to save the world over and over again from the alien Vec threat, the aliens move and make it clear when they are going to attack, to which you can then prioritize enemies, pull, push, blind or freeze them in order to negate the most harmful action to you. This is roguelite in nature, since failure sends one pilot to another timeline with a variety of mechs to choose from as well. Very cleverly designed and almost seems like a roguelite puzzle game, as crazy as that sounds. Whenever roguelite action games get talked about, inevitably, The Binding of Isaac and Nuclear Throne will be mentioned, but my pick for top of the class has to be Enter the Gungeon.
The past is dead. The masters are slain. Yet the Gungeon remains.
A bullet hell dungeon crawler that infuses Dungeons and Dragons with gun puns. Battle the gun dead as you seek the ultimate prize, a gun that can kill the past. In the years since release, the developers have added more free content through a series of patches, with a total of 243 guns currently in the game, providing so much variety and wacky fun, since these, in addition to your standard rifles and pistols, do get insanely creative as well. A large variety of characters and a ton of secrets makes this one of the best and most replayable roguelites out there. CrossCode's development was a long time coming, first starting in 2012 and releasing in early access in 2015, followed with the 1.0 version in 2018. This is a 16-bit action-adventure RPG that pays tribute to games of the past, especially in terms of the look, combat, and systems. Playing as an amnesiac character with a limited number of words in your vocabulary, you are scurried away to a new world since you are key to some sort of secret. Essentially, this is a single-player MMO where the world and content is MMO scale, but no need to connect to other people. Instead, NPCs and quest objectives are the driving force, as is the narrative, but the sheer amount of content in this is absolutely mind-boggling, with some people logging over 100 hours in this. This developer, again, have continued to release free content patches, with the New Game Plus mode recently added in September 2019 and the epilogue and final dungeon being planned for 2020, but a wholly impressive package that will keep you occupied for hours. The indie darling that is Shovel Knight Treasure Trove deserves a high spot in the pantheon of indie games of the decade simply for how iconic the character this has become, crossing over to games like Smash Bros. And BLOODSTAINED Ritual of the Night, just to mention a few, and even has its own officially licensed amiibo. An 8-bit action platformer that is a pretty blatant tribute to the Blue Bomber, replacing man with knight, the Mario-style overworld map, fantastic music and DuckTales-style platforming, all combined into a package with its own unique feel. The prequel campaigns for Plague, Spectre and King Knight are also massive content drops, all released for free, and one of the best retro-style platformers out in the market.
There is a great horror beneath the manor. A crawling chaos that must be destroyed.
One of my favourite games of all time is Darkest Dungeon, the roguelite RPG with cosmic horror elements, as you return to the hamlet where your ancestor has unleashed a great evil from beneath the manor, causing all sorts of monstrosities to come through. The turn-based combat is highly position dependent, with characters picking up negative quirks and stress-inducing ailments along the way, a large variety of character classes that all feel unique, and the pain of permadeath also feature prominently, all wrapped up in what is now an iconic art style. Another game like Bastion which makes excellent use of a narrator, this is dark, challenging, and oh so fun.
The Darkest Dungeon.
My 2019 Game of the Year is the spiritual successor to the Castlevania series, where one of the original creators, Koji Igarashi, was involved after Konami more or less stopped making games. A very classically designed one of these, the sheer amount of variety in terms of the enemy shards, equipment, cooking system, enemy variety, biomes and all that is pretty impressive, and this game is not afraid to get stupid, allowing you to become stupidly overpowered, which can be fun. For a game that turned out well despite the potential to be catastrophic, I'm very glad that this game is good, and we'll see what's next from IGA. I've always been a fan of Harvest Moon, so when I first stumbled upon Stardew Valley prior to release, I was immediately on board and followed development quite closely. A farming sim made for PC with the quality of life tweaks spoke to me as a PC gamer, since Natsume and Marvelous to this day seem to be ignoring the platform. You inherit your grandfather's farm and leave your corporate job to move to the countryside, where you begin a simple life, clearing the land, planting crops, raising animals and making friends with the townspeople. It is a pleasant thought and fantasy to run off into the countryside, especially in our modern life, and this captures that feeling very well. The developer has continued to add more content in the form of multiplayer support, new farm layouts, events and more, and to this day is one of my all-time favorites that I leave installed on my PC. Even if you're not typically someone who looks for such a game, please trust me and give this a shot. Promise you won't regret it. And if you have been following along, of course, Hollow Knight comes in at number 1, a moody Metroidvania set in the ruined kingdom of Hallownest. The contrast between our adorable protagonist and host of bug-beast creepy crawlies is stark, with challenging boss battles being one of the key highlights. For a Kickstarter indie game, the scale and scope of its success is very impressive, but again, this takes a cue from Dark Souls in the storytelling, mostly told through journals and descriptions. One common issue that I have seen with the game is that people do have a tendency to bounce off, with the pacing in the first 2 areas being a little slow. However, stick with it, and a whole world opens up, filled with dark mystery, challenging combat, and perhaps somewhat of a poignant tale. The combat is the highlight here, with so many interesting and challenging boss encounters that really puts your skills to the test, where you have a variety of charms, magic, and your ever-trusty nail sword at your side. The developers also released free content DLC for this, adding more abilities, areas, boss fights and more, so super consumer friendly and worth a mention. As such, this is an absolute masterpiece of a title from a team of 3 people, which again is super inspiring, and you bet that I am so ready for Silksong, hopefully coming in again at number 1 when I make another video like this in 10 years. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, share and subscribe. Check out the recommended playlist or the best pick for you, and I will see you after the jump.